Greetings, citizens! I'm Jeff, and what a year we had for indie games, huh? While so many outlets claim 2022 was a slow year for gaming, here in the nation of Nindie, we could barely keep up. Today's video is all about looking back on the previous year and picking our 10 favorite releases. So head down to the comments, tell me what your favorites were, and let me know if this list helps you find anything new to keep your Joy-Cons synced. Unless this is your first Nindie Nation video, you know that we love the Nindie trifecta, and that's exactly what Revita is. It features procedurally generated levels, roguelike mechanics, and RPG elements. But in order to stand out, a trifecta needs to bring something new, and that's exactly what developer Binstar has done with Revita. As a boy climbing an ever-changing clock tower to unlock his lost memories, Revita is full of small, fast-paced, and action-packed rooms with combat that mixes twin-stick shooting with abilities, a little bit of melee, and a lot of platforming. The blend of combat and locomotion with quick challenges reminds me of 2020's Scourgebringer, as does the dark tones and somber theme. As with any trifecta, there's a mix of short and long-term progression, so every run can be different, but you're always upgrading your base character and unlocking new possibilities in between each run. Revita also changes things up by making your only currency your life. Some upgrades cost only half a hit point, but when you initially only start with 3, it makes every decision feel much more strategic. You can earn health back and even buff your health with armor, but more than most roguelites, you're constantly faced with the gamble of risk versus reward in a way that feels much more fun than it does punishing. Add in a huge variety of weapons, a few story-driven upgrades, and accessibility options that allow players of any level to see everything the game has to offer, and you've got yourself a fun, tight experience that feels great to play for a few minutes or for a few hours at a time. And that's before the enormous 2.0 patch coming in early 2023. Number 9 is one of the newer games on this list, and its timing might cause it to rank a bit lower than it otherwise would have. After modernizing the beat-em-up genre in 2019, River City Girls 2 arrived in December to show us that Arc System Works and WayForward still know how to raise the bar. A much safer sequel, River City Girls 2 is all about bigger, better, and more, offering 4-player co-op with online play in tow, and 6 characters who play wildly different from each other. With a new story complete with voice acting throughout and one of the best soundtracks of the year, just living in the world of River City is a treat. Gameplay-wise, the blend of depth and simplicity could only come from one of the best fighting game developers in the industry, as you can button mash your way to victory, or take the time to buy all of the moves available and unleash insane combos with every encounter. The RPG systems have been expanded too, making it easier to grind out experience if you want to overpower a character, or just to make sure you can buy every item from the shop, because even healing items will offer a one-time permanent stat upgrade the first time you consume them, so they're always worth seeking out. Unfortunately, the game suffers from poor performance, with low frame rates, stutters, and long load times all being far too frequent. I don't find them to necessarily hurt the gameplay, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to assume it'll remain as is, even though I'm pretty sure we'll get a couple of patches to eventually smooth things out. Either way, River City Girls 2 is an excellent beat-em-up that's a bit more challenging than most and offers deep, rewarding gameplay, a ton to see and do, and every aspect of its presentation is just icing on the Nindie cake. Another game released towards the end of the year, and currently the most recent game I rolled credits on, The Night Witch, for me, seemed to come out of nowhere. Developed by super awesome hyper-dimensional mega team.
God, I love saying that.
This is a fine example of a traditionally mobile game developer spreading their wings to outstanding results. Somewhere between a bullet hell shooter and a Metroidvania, The Night Witch is a tough game to pin a genre on. You play as the runt of a team essentially revered as superheroes, and after an enemy invasion, must protect your people by completing missions spread throughout multiple interwoven environments. You'll be tasked with retrieving items for people, defeating nasty enemies, and even going on rescue missions. The tasks you complete, the friends you make, and the way you choose to speak to the people you're protecting all play into a morale system which alters both your upgrade path and the story based on if you act as a benevolent leader or a gun for hire. Naturally, as a witch, you can freely fly around the screen while swapping in between weapons and abilities based on a rotating inventory of magic cards. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this game is pretty tough. It's not traditional bullet hell tough, but encounters will frequently require multiple tries as you learn enemy patterns and figure out the best loadout for each scenario. Thankfully, there's a helpful cheat system of sorts that allows numerous ways to adjust the difficulty, ranging from increased health drops to full-on invincibility and unlimited magic. I really like this system, and since there's no consequence for using it, I found it to be a handy option during some of the game's more challenging encounters. As a whole, The Night Witch is a wonderful experience, bolstered by a story and characters which reminded me of the Owl House, with beautiful artwork, tight gameplay, and a soundtrack that always added to the experience. If you're looking for something different and you like what you're seeing now, I highly recommend The Night Witch. What do you get when you combine beat-em-ups, kaiju, Voltron, and a bit of pro wrestling? Well, on paper, not something I'd be interested in, but boy was I wrong, because Dawn of the Monsters blew me away this year to the point that I put over 30 hours into this game. Shout out to 13am Games, who first made Runbow, a crazy multiplayer mashup of platform racing and brawling, then followed it up with Double Cross, an underrated Metroidvania with an emphasis on traversal. Dawn of the Monsters just proves once again that this is one hell of a talented studio. Using a gorgeous comic book art style, the story is set at the end of humanity losing its war against the evil Nephilim, and you're a part of the Defense Alliance Worldwide Network, or DAWN.
See what they did there?
Playing alone or with a co-op partner, you pick from one of 4 playable characters, 2 of which are Voltron or Power Rangers-like robots, which are generally quicker and more nimble, or 2 Nephilim, which are controlled by remote pilots, one being a fire-based Godzilla-like creature, and the other being more of a defense-oriented, turtle-like monster? As the surprisingly interesting story plays out, with fantastic voice acting in tow, you drop into cities under attack like Tokyo or Toronto, and walk left to right defeating waves of monsters. Each level only takes a few minutes, but there's so much going on, the time flies by. Weapons are scattered about, you can pick up or destroy just about every building in sight, there's hazards to watch out for, and there's occasional objectives like destroying outposts or protecting someone to keep things interesting. You're graded on your damage dealt versus taken, overall speed throughout the level, and variety of moves used, and the moves are what really sets this game apart. You move deliberately slower and you're huge on the screen. It takes some getting used to, but once you're used to the attack animations and you're comfortable with your loadout of blocks, grabs, melee, and special powers, you'll love how tactile the game feels. There's also some RPG mechanics with level rankings leading to equipable items which can drastically change not only your playstyle, but also your chances of getting a high score as you revisit levels. So you can get better equipment, then backtrack to an older level and knock out a high score, and then move on from there. I've got a feeling that this game might be one of the hardest sales for most of you watching, so let me be clear. Even if you don't like kaiju, and even if you don't like wrestling games, if you enjoy a solid beat-em-up and you're interested in a very well-told, thought-provoking sci-fi story, Dawn of the Monsters is absolutely worth your time. And then we venture back into the world of retro-inspired games where developers take a quirky game of yesteryear and infuse it with modern mechanics. And boy is this a good one. Berserk Studio and the arcade crew released Infernax on Valentine's Day, and it was the first time in 2022 that I thought,
oh yeah, this is Game of the Year material.
Taking the skeleton of Castlevania II: Simon's Quest, Infernax is a pixelated gore fest that follows a chosen knight trying to send demons back to the hell they came from. Given its primary inspiration, you're dropped into an interconnected series of levels that aren't exactly open world, but still offer plenty of room for exploration, backtracking, and side quests as you work your way through the primary story and its network of towns and dungeons. I was hooked on this game from the jump. With its excellent soundtrack and compelling narrative, the game employs a bit of a morality system where you're occasionally given the option to, say, empathize and try to cure a zombie, or just bash its head in, and the choices you make, plus the percentage of secrets you find, can open up a few different endings that are different enough to warrant multiple playthroughs, which are encouraged more by some really fun takes on New Game Plus. If you die, and you probably will, you do lose whatever currency you're carrying and have to go back to collect it. So, combined with slower-paced combat, it's got a bit of Souls-like flair to it. But if that's a turnoff for you, don't let it be, because after the first hour or so, you can grind out experience to the point that death isn't much of a risk outside of a few frustrating platforming segments. Infernax is loaded with quality from start to finish, with every corner of the game having some sort of tongue-in-cheek video game reference, and the level of polish, from the gameplay to the artwork to one of my favorite soundtracks of the year. It's clear that Infernax is a labor of love that any fan of retro games needs to check out. Moving into the top 5 of the year, the game holding our 5th spot is a bit arbitrary because I'm trying to see the forest from the trees while currently, at the time of recording, head over heels in love with Chained Echoes. This isn't an RPG that'll win over newbies, rather, Matthias Linda and team have crafted a love letter to JRPGs that embodies the best the genre had to offer during the 16 and 32-bit glory days. I've yet to roll credits, but I'm over 45 hours in, and truly believe it to be one of the best RPGs I've ever played. With a globetrotting story about an unlikely group of heroes trying to destroy an evil magical MacGuffin and the baddies who wield it, the story itself isn't anything particularly new. The way it's told, though, the quality of its dialogue, the depth of each character, and everything else that surrounds this game is hands down best in class. For you fellow JRPG nerds, it starts by borrowing combat from Chrono Trigger with exploration similar to Breath of Fire, complemented by equipment and progression that's reminiscent of Final Fantasy IX. After the curtain closes on the first of 4 acts, you'll see a major influence from Xenogears and the, later half of Final Fantasy VI. Mechs are also a big part of the game, especially as you get deeper into the story, opening up new modes of traversal and a significant welcome twist in the combat system. Speaking of, the combat is pretty standard fare, with each character playing a unique role, but there are 2 features that help set it apart. A buddy system allows up to 8 characters to swap in and out of the active party of 4 during combat, and then the overdrive system gives you a significant boost in stats as long as you manage it properly by knowing when to do things like defend, swap party members, or use similar actions to the party member that preceded the current turn. All in all, Chained Echoes lands at a somewhat arbitrary number 5 because I was worried that recency bias would just make me rank this at number 1, leaving me to potentially regret that decision in the future. But make no mistake, Chained Echoes is without a doubt one of the best JRPGs I have ever played. So what's better than that?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
The Ninja freaking Turtles, my dudes. Now, I won't belabor the point here, as for some reason 2022 was a comeback year for these radical dudes, and Shredder's Revenge saw no shortage of gushing praise across the gaming landscape. For me, what Tribute and Dotemu managed to pull off with this spiritual sequel to 1992's beloved Turtles in Time is, I think it's pretty much perfect. and the only thing I could want beyond what's already on offer here is more. The 4-player arcade beat-em-up action is back, now allowing up to 6 players at a time for some truly chaotic fun. The combat is a flawless balance of being simple enough for button mashers, but deep enough to keep veterans happy. Presentation-wise, when you theme it around the cartoon of every millennial's childhood, even bringing back the original voice cast, adding in Splinter, April O'Neil, and Casey Jones as playable characters, throw in tons of deep-cut references from across the Turtleverse, and back it all up with a soundtrack from the illustrious T. Lopes, whose previous works include Sonic Mania and Streets of Rage 4? I mean, what more could you ask for? There's a simple leveling system, an interconnected and replayable story mode, an arcade mode for that classic experience, and well-implemented online play throughout. They even added in a bunch of fun new options to tinker with in an update that dropped in December 2022. As I had said over the summer after having spent a few days with it at launch, I think above all else, this isn't just a fantastic game for 2022, Shredder's Revenge is a game that I will be revisiting probably for the rest of my life. Rounding out the list with the top 3 games of 2022 was no small task. I considered what I played the most, what I kept coming back to, how the games performed, and how I'd feel about this year's list later down the road. As another sequel to another genre mainstay, the number 3 pick this year is the game I put more hours into than any other, Rogue Legacy 2. Now, argue down in the comments all you like, and yes, we all know that roguelike games with their endless loop of dying and starting over in procedurally generated worlds dates all the way back to the 1980s game Rogue.
Hence the name.
It was Cellar Door Games and their 2013 outing of Rogue Legacy that created the template for the modern roguelite. They honed all the systems, so procedural generation always rolled a good time, and tacked on some permanent progression so that everyone who played had a chance to see the game through at their own pace. And boy, was it a hit. Fast forward almost a decade later, and I'll be damned if they didn't do it all over again. Of course, the visuals have been spruced up. Every part of the presentation has shed its low-budget beginnings to embrace a modern yet fitting style, but as the developers themselves stated, they didn't just want to make a sequel, they set out to make Rogue Legacy 3 before Rogue Legacy 2 even existed. First off, there's a ton of platforming now, and it is so tight, so fine-tuned, and is the only aspect of the game that will see all players receiving the same upgrades at around the same time. There's entire biomes based off of kick-flipping off obstacles, phase-dashing through evil purple goo, and a steady ramp of platforming challenges that feel incredible to master. Then they thought they'd take the generic weapons of the original and expand that to over 24 character classes, almost all of which play impressively different from one another. In addition to the Sword and Shield Knight, the axe-wielding Barbarian, and the omnidirectional Spear of the Valkyrie, you get classes like the Chef, who can reflect every projectile, the Boxer, who gets up close and personal with crazy fast combos, and the Ronin, whose insanely long reach and equally long cooldown requires careful timing and precision, but makes every felled enemy feel like an accomplishment. The amount of variety is never-ending, and it extends to the overall progression, which now includes a resolve system which acts as a risk versus reward for all kinds of buffs, and every single class now has its own separate leveling system too. I could go on forever about Rogue Legacy 2, and frankly, it feels like you could play it forever before seeing everything that it brings to the table. But when a game is this much fun and offers such a vast array of new mechanics, I'm willing to play Rogue Legacy 2 for as long as it takes. The top 2 games could switch places any given day, but the title that takes our number 2 spot is here because of how it balanced every aspect of its presentation and gameplay to create an experience I doubt I'll ever forget. Young Souls is the first full release by 1P2P Studio, though the French team has over a decade of experience in the games industry, and it shows. Portsboro is a boring, sleepy town, home to Jen and Tristan, the red-headed orphan twins who have been taken under the wing of a local crazy inventor referred to only as the Professor. While the visuals look like a children's board book come to life, the game is very M-rated, as the twins are foul-mouthed hooligans whose vocabulary would be right at home in an episode of South Park. They're outcasts, a pair who frequently skip class and cause trouble only to be inevitably welcomed home by their foster father. The gameplay draws a line right down the middle of an action RPG and a side-scrolling brawler. Combat is the deepest I've ever seen in the genre, as it mixes offense and defense with an ever-growing and evolving set of magic abilities that allow you to build epic combos as you swap between Jen and Tristan mid-combo. Trust me when I say the battling never gets old. As an RPG, the mechanics include minigames, equipment, grinding, stats, crafting, and just enough stuff to keep you busy without ever being overwhelming. A light, early game spoiler, but about an hour into the game, the Professor goes missing, and the twins discover he's vanished into a secret underground system of tunnels that are home to an entire race of goblins. The narrative regarding how the goblins are down there provides a level of world building that brings the city and its underbelly to life, and the race to save the Professor compels you to always keep pushing forward. As you progress through the game's 8-hour story, you'll meet more than 20 bosses, each with their own motivations, story beats, and a surprisingly tough challenge to overcome. The twins themselves are constantly tossing insults during battle and bickering with each other as you explore the game's 4 dungeons. But when push comes to shove, they portray sibling love and loyalty like very few stories do. At nighttime, you'll push through the Goblin City in a rush to save the Professor, making it as far as possible thanks to a system that really puts the light in roguelite. And during the day, you'll navigate the twins' lives, preparing for the next excursion, all while telling the lies needed to keep your secrets safe from suspicious prying eyes. I love the combat and its accompanying RPG systems, and the presentation, be it the visuals or soundtrack, couldn't have been a better fit. But it's the way that all of those pieces build on the story that hooked me so hard. There's a real urgency to Young Souls, and every night when I finished playing, it was all I could think about until my next chance to play more. I was genuinely shocked by the twists the game threw my way multiple times, which kept a really brisk pace to the point that I almost felt guilty when I'd stop and grind out a dungeon or go backtrack to find hidden items for crafting. In the end, the payoff received as the credits rolled was one of those times that made me just put down the controller and say,
Now this is why I play video games.
For that reason, and considering the emotion I'm reliving just making this video, I'm more than confident in saying that Young Souls belongs right at the top of our 2022 Game of the Year list. But it isn't at the top, even though most of the year I thought it would be. Rather, the game that tops this year's list is the one which captured the essence of why I love video games more than any other title I played in 2022. Blast Brigade vs. the Evil Legion of Dr. Creed does hardly anything new. It's a 2D action-adventure that blends light Metroidvania elements with run-and-gun combat and lots of platforming. But something about how well it does everything it sets out to do, just like Young Souls, kept me coming back again and again and again, to the point that it was my #1 most played game 3 of the past 12 months, clocking in over 50 hours by time I finished my second full playthrough. Blast Brigade puts you in the shoes of Jeff Jefferson,
Maybe that's why I love it.
a bumbling action movie hero who, if you've ever seen The Emperor's New Groove, is basically the video game equivalent of Kronk. He's crash-landed on a remote island and now must find a way off. As you gather yourself, you spend the early hours of the game traversing the island to find your crew, all while being chased by a rogue vigilante. Eventually, you can swap between a couple of different characters, and then eventually getting the ability to hot swap between all 4 characters, who all have a unique loadout when it comes to the weapons they use, how they run, jump, and move across the world, and each one equips a unique gadget that completely changes the way you approach any given situation, be it platforming or combat. One thing I love about this game is, for as simple as it is, it's just airtight. The platforming segments can be incredibly hard, but they're always fair. The bosses can be bullet spongy at times, but the reward for overcoming them is always extremely gratifying. The story it tells also isn't anything too out of the ordinary. As you progress through the island, you uncover an evil plan being hatched by Dr. Creed. There's backstabbing, a couple of big twists, and even a whole parallel world to uncover. But what really got me was the writing and delivery of the dialogue. Every single line is tongue-in-cheek B-tier action movie fare that is cringy in all the best ways. Puns galore, fourth wall breaking, and constant references to the ridiculous nature of the challenges which are only possible through a video game. Blast Brigade's just fun. It's always fun. Sometimes it gets frustrating, especially if you're going for all the gadgets and collectibles, but like any other good game that's tough, completing the challenge nets a great reward and an excellent sense of accomplishment. It's no lie that we play a lot of Metroidvanias here at Nindie Nation, and they were in full supply this past year. But something about Blast Brigade just hit different. It's so colorful and so fun. It took me back to how I felt playing through Guacamelee 1 and 2. In fact, I'd say that's probably the closest comparison, only you have a bevy of guns and ballistic weapons to choose from instead of melee combos. And you can swap between 4 different characters instead of, turning into a chicken. When making this year's list, I was going back and forth between Young Souls and Blast Brigade, and ask me in a month, I might have changed my mind. The thing is, every time I thought about Blast Brigade, I just smiled and remembered how much fun I had with it. I remembered sharing boss strategies with my friend Scott from The Gaming Outsider. I remembered sitting in my office on a rainy Saturday afternoon trying to get the last upgrade in the ice cavern. I remembered how proud I was when I beat the game at 2 in the morning, and I just remembered how much Blast Brigade felt like a video game in the very best way. And that's why Blast Brigade vs. the Evil Legion of Dr. Creed is Nindie Nation's favorite game of 2022. Anything on today's list that you've played? Where do you think these games should land? Agree? Disagree? Are any of these games on your wish list and now you're planning to pick them up? Let me know down in the comments. Nindie Nation covers all of the new indie games worth checking out on your Switch every single Wednesday, then we play a couple of them live every Thursday night. So subscribe if you want more content like this, click the like button if you had a good time, and join us on Discord if you want to chat with other fans of indie games. Thanks so much for your support in 2022. Until the next video, I'm Jeff. This has been Nindie Nation's Top 10 Indie Games of 2022, and thank you for watching.